Well, hello there, Mr. Parrish here, and I'm going to go over a whole bunch of 7th grade math words. For those of you who don't speak English as your first language, it may not be a bad idea to turn on the closed caption function in YouTube and maybe set it to auto-generate to the language of your choice. That'll pretty much read every single word that we see in this video, and it's going to be a lot of them. Absolute value means the distance a number is from 0 on the number line. Basically, if you're taking the absolute value of a number, it becomes positive. So the absolute value of a negative number becomes positive, and the absolute value of a positive stays positive. An acute triangle is a triangle where all three angles are less than 90 degrees. The additive inverse is basically subtraction, but instead of subtracting, you add the negative. Adjacent angles are two angles that are right next to each other. In other words, they're two angles that share the same vertex and the same side. Area is how much space a two-dimensional shape takes. The best way to describe area is how much carpet a floor might need, or how much paint a wall would take. They're measured in square units, like square feet, square inches, stuff like that. The area of a circle is how much space a circle takes up. You can calculate that by taking A equals pi r squared. In other words, pi times the radius squared. The area of a regular polygon is a little more complicated. There is a formula for it, you can see it on the bottom, but the idea is still there. It's how much space on a two-dimensional plane that the shape takes up. The area of a quadrilateral is calculated depending on what type of quadrilateral you're talking about. Typically, we deal with rectangles, and the area of a rectangle is base times height. Here are the other shapes if you need to calculate the area of those. The area of a triangle is calculated by taking half of the base times the height. And if you're wondering, well, is that half of a rectangle? Yeah, it is. An axis is a part on the coordinate plane that is either a line going left-right or up-down. The y-axis is the axis going up-down, and the x-axis is the axis going left-right. Circumference is just a fancy way of saying the perimeter of a circle. In other words, what is the length of the outside of the circle? You can calculate that by doing A equals 2 pi r, or pi times the radius times 2. A coefficient is a number multiplied to a variable. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to 90 degrees. In other words, two angles whose sum is a right angle. Compound events are two events occurring separately and have no effect on each other. In the picture shown, I could flip a coin and roll a number cube, and the two shouldn't have any effect on each other. A coordinate plane, also known as a Cartesian plane, is a way that we graph coordinates or ordered pairs on a two-dimensional figure. It is made up of an x-axis and a y-axis. The coordinate system is just another name for the fact that we have a coordinate plane and ordered pairs and an x-axis and a y-axis. It's just a name for everything. Coordinates, also called ordered pairs or points, is just that. It's a point. It's made up of two numbers, the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate. The x is the first number and the y is the second number. A cube is a three-dimensional shape where it has 6 sides and all sides are squares. Data is information that can be used to make predictions or to calculate information. A diagram is a picture that is used to describe mathematical information. Sometimes the diagram can be a graph or just a picture that you see here that describes separate fractions. Distributive property is when you have a number multiplied to a parentheses, and inside the parentheses you're adding or subtracting or both. You take the number on the outside of the parentheses and multiply it to every single term inside the parentheses. An equation is any number sentence with an equals sign in it. An equilateral triangle is a triangle where all 3 sides are exactly the same. That also means that all 3 angles are exactly the same. And in the case of an equilateral triangle, all 3 angles will be 60 degrees. An estimate is an educated guess. Evaluate means to simplify a mathematical expression. An event is something that takes place in a probability problem. For example, if I'm playing cards, I could ask what is the probability of me getting a 5 of diamonds? The event would be the 5 of diamonds. An expression is a number sentence usually separated by addition or subtraction signs. Very important, an expression does not have an equal sign. A factor is anything that divides a number or a term. For example, 12 has several factors. 2 times 6, or maybe 3 times 4, or 2 times 2 times 3. Frequency is how often something is used in data collection. For example, if there was a class and 5 kids have a birthday in February, the frequency for February would be 5. A geometric figure is a shape. It could be 3-dimensional, it could be 2-dimensional. It all depends on the problem that you have. A graph is a visual representation to describe data. There are several types of graphs: line graph, bar graph, histogram. An inequality is used to describe when two things are not equal to each other. In this problem, you see a red symbol, and that means is less than. The other inequality is greater than. Sometimes you might see is less than or equal to, or is greater than or equal to. An integer number is any number, positive or negative, that does not have a decimal or a fraction attached to it. Integers could be -5, 10, 0, as long as it doesn't have a decimal and as long as it doesn't have a fraction. An isosceles triangle is a triangle where two sides are congruent or exactly the same. The two sides that are congruent are called legs, and the side that is not congruent is called a base. A likely event is an event that's probably going to happen. So if I were to roll a number cube, I'm likely to get any number. Long division is the process of taking a number and dividing it from a larger number. A non-zero divisor is the number being divided from another number. The reason why we say non-zero is because you're never allowed to divide by 0. A number line is exactly what it sounds like. Negative numbers go on the left, positive numbers go on the right. As numbers go further to the left, those numbers get smaller. As numbers go further to the right, those numbers get larger. An obtuse triangle is a triangle with only one obtuse angle. You can never have a triangle with more than one obtuse angle. Remember, obtuse means greater than 90 degrees. An ordered pair is another word for coordinate or point. In an ordered pair, you have two numbers. The first number is the x-coordinate, and the second number is the y-coordinate. The origin of the coordinate plane is the point 0, 0. It is exactly in the middle of the coordinate plane. Percent means out of 100. So 50% means 50 out of 100, or a half. The percent decrease is the percent amount where a number gets smaller. So if I go from 100 to 80, that is a 20% decrease. Percent increase is the opposite. It's the percent that a number gets larger. So if I go from 100 to 120, that is a 20% increase. A polygon is a shape whose sides are straight lines only. So a polygon can be a triangle or a hexagon. A polygon can't be a circle because circles don't have sides that are straight lines. A population is the group of people or the group of objects being surveyed. A prediction is like an estimate. It's an educated guess of what you think is going to happen. A prism is a three-dimensional object whose sides are made up of polygons. Probability is the likeliness of something occurring. If the probability of something is 0, that means it's not going to happen. If the probability is 1, that means it will happen. You find probability by dividing what you want over the total sample space. A proportion is when two fractions equal each other. So as you can see in the picture, 2/4 is the same as 4/8. A proportional relationship describes proportional reasoning. Usually it looks like a graph that goes through the origin, and it's going to be a straight line. A protractor is a math tool used to measure how large an angle is. It's like a ruler, but in this case, it determines how wide two lines are away from each other to determine how big that angle is. A pyramid is a three-dimensional shape that has a polygon for a base, but goes up to a point, so the sides are going to be triangles. Quadrants are the four parts of a coordinate plane. The first quadrant is on the top right, and then it goes counterclockwise. So quadrant 2 is the top left, quadrant 3 is the bottom left, and quadrant 4 is the bottom right. A quadrilateral is a polygon with four sides. So quadrilaterals can be parallelograms, they can be rectangles, they can be squares. As long as it is a two-dimensional shape, with 4 sides. A quotient is the answer you get when you divide one number from another. A random sample is when you just take an object in a probability problem. For example, if you are reaching into a bag of marbles and you just pick one. A rate is a quotient of 2 separate numbers. The most common rates are miles per hour, feet per second, gallons per minute. A ratio is 2 numbers divided from each other. A rational coefficient is exactly what it sounds like. It's a coefficient that could be a fraction or a rational number. It's a number being multiplied to a variable. A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. For example, 2/3 is rational. 0.5 is rational because it could be written as 1/2. 3 is rational because it can be written as 3/1. Relative frequency is a percent used to describe probability or how much of something you have. For example, if I survey 50 people and 20 people like chocolate milk, then the relative frequency of the people who like chocolate milk is going to be 40%. A repeating decimal is a number that is a decimal and part of that decimal goes on forever. For example, 0.333333333 is repeating, and you could write that as 0.3 with a line on top of the 3. A right prism is a 3-dimensional shape that stands straight up. There's no leaning. It creates 90-degree angles from the edges to the bases. It's a perfect right prism. A right rectangular prism is a right prism where all the sides are rectangles. Usually we just call these rectangular prisms. A right rectangular pyramid is a pyramid that has a rectangle for a base and it goes straight up to a point. No leaning, it's just the height is exactly in the middle of the rectangle. A right triangle is a triangle that has one right angle. The longest side of a right triangle is called the hypotenuse. The 2 shorter sides of a right triangle are called legs. A sample space is all the possibilities that a probability problem could have. For example, the sample space of a coin is either heads or tails, or a number cubed is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. A scale drawing is a picture created from a much larger object, but scaled down, and has the right proportions. A scalene triangle is a triangle where all three sides are different in length. A signed number is exactly what it sounds like, a number with either a positive or a negative in front of it. It could possibly have a positive or negative symbol as well. Simple interest is money added to a specific amount. It can be calculated by taking the original amount that you have, multiplying it times the rate as a decimal, and then multiplying that times time. In other words, I equals P times R times T. A simulation is an experiment carried out in a data or probability problem. For example, I could be rolling two number cubes at the same time to try to figure out the probability of perhaps getting snake eyes. The solution set is all the possible answers a problem can have. Statistics is the study of data, usually trying to predict or guess how much something is going to happen or a probability that something is going to occur. Substitution is when you take a variable and replace it with a number and then evaluate. Supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. In other words, it's two angles whose sum creates a straight line. Surface area is the total area in a three-dimensional object. The best way to describe it is if you were wrapping up a gift, the surface area is the gift wrap being used. The surface area of a cube can be found by taking the area of one of the sides and multiplying it by 6. The equation to that is 6 times the side squared. The surface area of a right prism all depends on what type of right prism you have. But here are a few examples and here are a few formulas that you can use. Tax is a percentage used to add money on top of an existing price. What you do is if the tax is 6%, you multiply 6% to the original price, find that number, and add it to the original price. A terminating decimal is a decimal that stops. For example, 0.25 stops, so it's a terminating decimal. A tree diagram is a way to represent all the possible outcomes several objects can have. So in this problem, it looks like if you order food, you can get a burger and maybe a burger and fries, or you can get a different type of sandwich. It all depends. A triangle is a polygon with 3 sides. A unit rate is a rate broken down into its simplest form. So if you were to buy 3 pounds of food, you would find the unit rate by taking the total amount and dividing it by 3 so you can find out how much it costs per pound. An unlikely event is something that's probably not going to happen. So if I were to roll a number cube, I'm probably not going to get the letter F. A variable is a letter used in math to represent an unknown object. Vertical angles are 2 angles that are across from each other. They're created by 2 lines that intersect, and they share the same vertex in the middle. Vertical angles are also equal in measure, or congruent. Volume is how much space an object holds. So if the surface area of a cube is how much wrapping paper that covers the cube, then the volume is how much stuff the cube can hold on the inside. The volume of a cube is found by taking the length of the side and multiplying it to itself 3 times. In other words, side to the 3rd power, or side cubed. The volume of a right prism is all dependent on what the right prism looks like. The x-axis on a coordinate plane is the horizontal axis. It acts left to right. The x-coordinate in an ordered pair tells you how far you're going to go to the left or to the right. If the x-coordinate is negative, then you go left that many spaces. If it's positive, then you go right that many spaces. The y-axis in a coordinate plane is the up and down, or the vertical axis. The y-coordinate in an ordered pair tells you how far up or how far down you go when you're creating a point. If the y-coordinate is positive, you go up that many spaces, and if it's negative, you go down that many spaces.